Hi, my name is Sandra, and I'm 33 years old. If you had told me a year ago that the most humiliating day of my life would also become the day I found my strength, I would have laughed. Because I didn't feel strong. Not when I was forced to raise my son alone. Not when my own family looked at me like I was a cautionary tale. Not when I received the wedding invitation that wasn't sent out of love, but out of social obligation. I used to believe family was supposed to be your shelter in a storm. Mine? They were the storm. My mother, Martha, mastered the art of silent judgment. Her stares were louder than her words. My father, Randy, stood beside her like a shadow, present, but always fading when I needed light. And my sister, Andrea? The perfect one. The bride-to-be. The one who had everything I supposedly gave up. A husband-to-be, money, status, validation. And me? I had Peter, my 10-year-old son with eyes too wise for his age, and a heart that's held more pain than it ever should have. I walked away from Peter's father when I realized love shouldn't hurt every day. I chose peace over pretense, motherhood over misery. And I paid the price: rejection, isolation, mockery. For the past 4 years, I was invisible to them. No birthday invitations, no family dinners, not even a call when my car broke down in the middle of a snowstorm. So, when Andrea's wedding invitation showed up with her perfect calligraphy and that wax seal pressed like a threat, I stared at it for hours. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to give them another chance to remind me of how little they thought of me. But then Peter walked into the kitchen, still holding his pencil from homework, and saw the envelope on the table. "Is Aunt Andrea getting married?" he asked. I hesitated, then nodded. "Are we going?" he asked again, so simply. And in that moment, I realized, if I said no, I'd be teaching him that hiding was the only way to survive cruelty. So I smiled and said, "Yes, we're going." But deep inside, something told me this wasn't going to be just another family gathering. It was going to be the day they finally saw me. And the day I saw who they really were. The venue was beautiful. One of those renovated barns turned luxury wedding halls, high ceilings, crystal chandeliers hanging from reclaimed wood, long farmhouse tables lined with candles and fresh white roses. From the outside, it looked like a dream. But as soon as we walked through the doors, I felt it. That cold, invisible wall. I held Peter's hand tighter. He looked so handsome in his little thrift store suit. He had insisted on wearing a bow tie. I had borrowed a navy blue dress from a coworker, one of the few people in my life who didn't see me as broken. I had even curled my hair, added a little mascara. But the moment I stepped inside, it was clear. I didn't belong. Eyes glanced, then quickly turned away. Laughter hushed. No one greeted us. My mother sat at a long table near the front, surrounded by her church friends, looking like royalty. She saw me. She saw us and narrowed her eyes, then turned back to her wine as if the glass mattered more than her own daughter. My father was beside her, stiff in his suit, pretending to be busy adjusting his tie. Andrea stood near the arch, surrounded by bridesmaids and guests. She looked flawless in her sparkling couture gown, her hair styled like she belonged on the cover of a magazine. Her eyes landed on me for exactly 2 seconds. She smiled, that fake, tight-lipped smile I knew too well, then turned her back and disappeared into the crowd. There was no place card for me at the dinner tables. When I asked a server, he motioned toward a chair by the restrooms. Peter and I sat there quietly. We were close enough to hear the music, but far enough to feel like we weren't invited at all. Peter looked up at me and whispered, "Why is everyone acting weird?" I smiled and squeezed his hand. "They're just nervous. It's a big day." But I knew better. This wasn't nerves. This was intentional exclusion. And yet I didn't leave. I took Peter outside to the rose garden behind the barn and snapped a few photos of him. His smile in those pictures? It was real. Pure. He was the only reason I was still standing. He didn't deserve to feel like a ghost at his own family's celebration. Neither did I. But that night, we were about to be reminded. They didn't invite us to include us. They invited us to watch us break. Dinner passed in a blur. Peter picked at his food, and I sipped water just to have something to do with my hands. Every time Andrea walked by our table, she didn't even glance in our direction. A few guests gave us sympathetic smiles, but no one actually said anything. Not even a hello. We were furniture, background noise in Andrea's perfect wedding show. After the plates were cleared and the candles glowed low, someone tapped a glass. It was time for the toasts. The maid of honor went first, Andrea's sorority sister, full of tears and plastic nostalgia. Then Jordan's best man told a heartwarming story about their college years. People laughed. They clapped. They dabbed their eyes and sipped champagne. I leaned over to Peter, who was resting his head on my shoulder, and whispered, "Almost done. Then we can go." But then Andrea stood up. She didn't need a mic, but of course, she took one anyway. The DJ handed it to her like she was royalty, and the music dimmed. All eyes turned to her. She looked flawless, shining under the lights. And then her eyes locked on me. And I knew this wasn't going to be a thank you speech. "Thank you all so much for being here," Andrea began, smiling. "It means the world to me and Jordan to have all the people we love here tonight." Polite applause followed. I held my breath. "I want to thank my girls for the wild bachelorette weekend and my cousin Dana for fixing my makeup every hour in this heat," she continued. Laughter. Then, slowly, she turned her head right toward us. "And of course," she said sweetly, "I'm so touched my sister Sandra made the trip." I froze. "It must have been hard," Andrea went on, "coming all this way, with no husband, no money, just a useless kid." A few chuckles escaped the crowd. Some guests looked at their wine glasses. A woman behind me gasped softly. Peter sat up straight beside me. I couldn't breathe. My chest burned, but my face stayed frozen. "And yet," Andrea said with a dazzling smile, "family is family, right? Even when some people make questionable life choices." The mic lowered. Silence followed. Then, I heard my mother, Martha, say to the photographer loud enough for half the room to hear, "Let's not ruin the pictures with her face." And just like that, every wound they had ever given me, they ripped it open in front of 100 people. I don't know how long I sat there, stunned. My mind was buzzing, my ears ringing, my body numb. Peter leaned into me and whispered, "Can we go now?" I nodded slowly, but before we could move, Andrea's voice rang out again, sharp, dramatic. "Wait, has anyone seen my diamond bracelet?" Everyone turned. She placed a hand dramatically on her wrist, looking around like she'd just realized a crown was missing from her head. "It was a wedding gift," she said. $3,000. Real diamonds. Guests murmured. Heads turned. I instinctively pulled Peter closer to me. Andrea's gaze swept the room, then narrowed right in on us. "He was near the gift table," she said, pointing at Peter. "Right before it went missing." I blinked. "What?" She walked toward us in slow, angry strides, heels clicking like war drums. "You expect me to believe it's just a coincidence?" she snapped. "A $3,000 bracelet disappears and the only unfamiliar hands near it belong to him?" Peter stood up, confused and frightened. "I didn't take anything," he said quickly. "I didn't even touch the table." The room was dead silent. Someone whispered. A few people stood to get a better look. "Andrea, stop," I said, rising to my feet, placing myself between her and my son. "That's enough." But she shoved past me. Before I could react, she reached out, grabbed Peter by the collar, and slapped him across the face. The sound echoed through the reception hall like glass shattering. Peter stumbled back, eyes wide, holding his cheek. I screamed, lunging forward and yanking him away from her. "What is wrong with you?" I shouted, my voice breaking. "He's a thief," Andrea shrieked, pointing at Peter again. "He stole from me. He's 10 years old." I shouted back. "And he did nothing." People were on their feet. Some were gasping, others frozen. The DJ stared with his mouth half open. No one moved. No one stepped in. Except Peter. He wiped his cheek, stood up straighter, and turned toward the DJ booth. I placed a hand on his shoulder. Peter, wait. But he gently pushed past me, his face now filled not with fear, but with a strange, terrifying calm. He walked across the floor, one slow step after another, toward the booth. And I realized they thought they had broken him, but something in him had just woken up. I stood frozen as Peter crossed the dance floor, his small frame moving with calm determination. His collar still wrinkled from where Andrea had grabbed him, his cheek red from the slap. But he didn't look afraid. He looked ready. The DJ leaned down, confused, as Peter whispered something to him. Then, from the inside pocket of his jacket, Peter pulled out a small black USB drive. My heart jumped. I stepped forward instinctively. Peter, what is that? He turned, his voice surprisingly steady for a child who had just been assaulted. Mom, remember when Aunt Andrea borrowed your old phone? A few months ago when hers was broken? I blinked. Yes, I saw her using it. She was recording voice notes and video clips and texting someone. I didn't understand it at the time, but I backed everything up just in case. I copied it to this. He held up the USB. Gasps filled the room. Jordan turned from his table, eyes locked on Peter. Guests were no longer murmuring. They were frozen. Andrea shouted from across the room. He's lying. That's not real. Don't play it. But Peter didn't flinch. He looked at the DJ and said calmly, My mom doesn't know what's on this. But the groom deserves to. The DJ hesitated, eyes flicking to me. My throat tightened. This wasn't something I had planned. It wasn't something I even knew existed. I nodded once. Play it. Andrea bolted toward the booth, but Jordan stepped in front of her, voice firm. Let it play. She screamed. This is a setup. That's Sandra's doing. But no one stopped the music from fading. Peter returned to my side, breathing heavy but controlled. I crouched down beside him, still stunned. You backed up her data? From my old phone. He nodded. I didn't know if it meant anything. But I saw her laughing at you when she didn't know I was watching. And I saw the messages. I thought if she ever tried to hurt you. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. My son, just 10 years old, had quietly done what grown adults had failed to do. He prepared for the moment the world would try to break us. And now, in front of everyone, he was about to set it all on fire. The screen behind the wedding arch flickered to life. At first, it showed a still image. Andrea lounging on a couch in leggings, drink in hand, her hair in a messy bun. Casual, relaxed, unaware she was being recorded. Then the audio began. He's boring. Andrea's voice filled the speakers. But that house, the kitchen alone is worth sticking around for. I mean, morals don't pay mortgages. A ripple of gasps passed through the guests. I saw Jordan freeze, his face pale. Andrea lunged toward the screen. Turn it off. That's not part of the slideshow. Jordan stepped in front of her, his voice low but firm. Let it play. The DJ didn't hesitate. The next clip rolled. It was a screen recording. Text messages. At the top of the thread, Andrea read heart. Below it, a conversation with someone named Trish. Andrea, he's dumb enough to think I'm in love with him. Trish, girl, don't get caught. Andrea, once I'm pregnant, it's game over. 2 years, then divorce, alimony, the condo. Done. The guests were dead silent. Someone at Jordan's family table put a hand over her mouth. Another stood and walked out. Andrea looked around, her smile long gone, replaced with panic. It's fake, she screamed. It's edited. Sandra did this. She's jealous. But the next clip shut her up. It was a selfie video. Andrea in her car, sunglasses on, chewing gum. She laughed. This wedding? Just for show. I only invited Sandra, so people could see what rock bottom looks like. That kid of hers? I wouldn't let him touch my dog. She should have given him up when she had the chance. I flinched like the words were slaps. Peter just stared at the screen, jaw clenched. Andrea charged toward the DJ booth again, but Jordan grabbed her arm. Enough. She yanked free. So, what? You're calling it off? Jordan's voice trembled, but didn't break. You lied to me. You mocked my family. You assaulted a child. You humiliated your own sister at your own wedding. She stood there, stunned. You're ruining everything.
No, he said.
You did. The screen went black. No applause. No laughter. No music. Just silence thick enough to drown in. And in that moment, it wasn't just the wedding unraveling. It was the mask Andrea had worn her whole life, finally falling apart. And she knew it, because when she turned toward me, eyes burning with hatred, she had nothing left to hide behind. The silence was broken by my voice, steady, sharp. I'm calling the police. Andrea spun around.
What?
You can't, Sandra. Don't be dramatic. But I was already pulling my phone from my purse. You slapped my child. You falsely accused him of theft in front of 100 people. You don't get to walk away from that. Peter stood close to me, his fingers wrapped tightly around mine. I didn't shake. Not this time. 10 minutes later, 2 uniformed officers arrived. The music had never resumed. The guests were no longer smiling. Some were filming, others whispering. Everyone was watching. The taller officer approached Andrea. Ma'am, we've received a report of child endangerment and public assault. Andrea scoffed. He stole my bracelet. I was defending myself. The female officer turned to Peter, kneeling to his eye level. Son, did you take anything? Peter shook his head.
No.
I didn't touch her things. She's lying. Andrea shrieked. My bracelet is gone. It was a gift. The male officer nodded to his partner. Let's search the area. The search began. Tables were checked. Gift bags moved. Nothing. Then Officer Brooks, the female cop, turned to Andrea. Ma'am, can we check your belongings? Andrea froze. Excuse me? Why would I steal my own bracelet? It's standard procedure, the officer said flatly. Reluctantly, Andrea pointed to her purse, resting beneath the head table. The officer reached in, and within seconds, pulled out a small velvet box. Opened it. Inside was the diamond bracelet, still gleaming. The guests gasped again, louder this time. Andrea's mouth dropped open. That's not, I didn't, someone planted it. Officer Brooks looked up. You reported this bracelet stolen and claimed that boy took it. But it was in your own possession. It's a misunderstanding, Andrea cried. I was stressed. It's my wedding. No, Jordan said from behind her. Not anymore. The male officer stepped forward. Ma'am, you're being placed under arrest for filing a false report, child endangerment and assault. Please place your hands behind your back. Andrea screamed, but no one helped her. Not even our parents. Martha sat frozen. Randy rubbed his temple, but said nothing. Then Officer Brooks turned to them. We'll need to speak with both of you as well. Based on multiple witness statements, you contributed to the emotional abuse of the child and supported the false accusation. Martha finally snapped. This is ridiculous. But Officer Brooks didn't flinch. You'll have your chance to explain in court. And just like that, my family, who spent years making me feel invisible, was being seen for who they really were. Criminals hiding behind tradition. The scene felt surreal. Officers escorting Andrea in handcuffs down the aisle she had walked in her sparkling dress just hours earlier. Her veil trailed behind her like a torn lie. She screamed protests all the way to the exit, swearing vengeance, calling me names no sister should ever speak. But nobody stopped them. Not even Martha or Randy. They were too busy being questioned by the second officer. Faces pale, arms crossed, casting nervous glances around the room as whispers swirled like wildfire. Peter stood beside me, quiet but alert. I wrapped my arm around him. You did the right thing, I whispered. I just wanted them to stop hurting you, he replied softly. Across the room, Jordan stood frozen near the floral arch, his hands clenched. I walked over, unsure if I should say anything, but he turned to me first. I had no idea, he said, voice raw. You're not the first person she fooled, I replied. I know what that feels like. He nodded slowly. I'm sorry she hurt you. That she hurt him. I'm not sorry it came out, I said. It had to. We stood in silence for a moment. Then he looked toward the door where Andrea had disappeared. "I'm calling off everything," he said finally. "The marriage, the honeymoon, all of it. She lied to me. She planned to use me." He looked broken, but also relieved, like a man who had just stepped out of a burning house. Guests began to leave, some in awkward silence, others nodding at me respectfully. A few even offered quiet apologies for not speaking up earlier. I didn't need their pity, but I accepted their change in tone. One of Martha's church friends passed me and whispered, "I always wondered why she treated you like that." I didn't respond, because I no longer needed validation. As I walked Peter outside into the cool evening air, the last of the golden light faded into a soft dusk. Police cars still blinked red and blue across the gravel lot.
Peter looked up at me.
"Are they all going to jail?" I nodded.
"Yes."
"And I'm going to make sure of it." He smiled, not the strained smile of a child holding back pain, but a real one. Peaceful.
Proud.
That night, we didn't leave in shame. We left in power. And behind us, the wedding burned. Not in flames, but in truth. 3 weeks later, I walked into the county courthouse holding Peter's hand. He wore a navy blue shirt and black pants.
No tie.
He hated ties now. I wore the same dress I wore to the wedding. I wanted them to see I didn't need to change a thing to be taken seriously. Inside the courtroom, Andrea sat at the defense table in a beige suit, no makeup, her hair pulled back. The sparkle and arrogance from her wedding day?
Gone.
Martha sat behind her, eyes cold. Randy next to her, arms crossed, as if even now they believed none of this should have happened. But the law didn't bend for entitlement. The judge called the courtroom to order. The charges were read clearly. Andrea Johnson. Count 1. Filing a false police report. Count 2. Public assault of a minor. Count 3. Child endangerment. Count 4. Emotional harassment. The prosecutor laid it all out. The false accusation, the physical violence, the planted evidence, the video footage proving motive and malice. Peter sat beside me, clutching my hand, but not looking scared. He had already lived through the worst part. Andrea's attorney tried to paint her as emotionally overwhelmed, but the judge wasn't buying it. The evidence was too strong, too clear. The verdict: guilty on all charges. Her sentence? 1 year in county jail. A $5,000 fine. 2 years probation after release. Mandatory anger management counseling. Andrea cried, not because of guilt, but because control had slipped from her hands. Then came Martha and Randy. They were charged as co-conspirators for their verbal abuse, enabling false allegations, and contributing to the psychological distress of a minor. Their sentences? Martha, 6 months jail, $2,000 fine, 100 hours of community service. Randy, 3 months jail, mandatory family therapy, court-issued written apology. I stood as the verdicts were read.
Calm. Steady.
Vindicated. Peter leaned close and whispered, "We won." I whispered back, "No, we told the truth. The truth won." Outside the courthouse, reporters asked if I had any statement. I looked into the cameras and said, "I stayed silent for too long. I let them humiliate me, hurt my son, and call it family. But justice doesn't care about your last name. It cares about what's right. And today, the law stood with us." I didn't cry. Not this time. Because this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of our freedom. The morning after the sentencing, Peter and I made pancakes, chocolate chip ones, his favorite. We danced in our socks to old songs on the radio, flipping pancakes like we hadn't just dismantled generations of cruelty in a courtroom the day before. But something had changed. Not around us, inside us. There was no more heaviness when I opened the fridge and saw only basics. No more ache when I passed our cracked kitchen window. Because none of that mattered anymore. Not when we'd reclaimed something much bigger. Our dignity. That night at the wedding wasn't just a disaster. It was a doorway. For years, I had shrunk myself to survive. I swallowed insults from my mother. I endured silence from my father. I let Andrea walk over my name, my worth, and my motherhood. I told myself it was better to stay small than to fight. But Peter showed me something different. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't throw punches. He simply stood up and said, "This is the truth." And the truth shattered everything. People from my past began reaching out after the story hit local news. Some with apologies. Others with excuses. I answered none of them. I didn't need them to rewrite history. I already had. Peter started writing again. He filled a spiral notebook with short stories, tales of a brave boy and his quiet, tired mom who faced villains and liars and always walked away stronger. One evening, he handed me a page and said, "This one's us." I read it, and I cried. Happy tears. Healing ones. A few weeks later, Jordan emailed me. Just one line. "I hope you and Peter are okay." I still think about what he did that night. I replied, "We're okay. And he still thinks about you, too." There was no grand reunion. No dramatic forgiveness arc. Just peace. The kind of peace that comes after war. The kind that isn't quiet, but earned. Martha never contacted me again. Neither did Randy. Andrea appealed her sentence, but it was denied. Peter never asked about them. He was too busy becoming the kind of man they could never break. And me? I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was rising. And every time someone asked me, was it worth it? All the drama, the confrontation, the court. I smiled and said, it was worth it because he saw me fight. And that little boy, who once held my hand in shame, now walks beside me in pride. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of your own strength or someone you care about, don't forget to like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Every voice matters. Every story deserves to be heard. And here, we honor them all with truth, courage, and heart. Thank you for watching, and remember, real justice starts when we refuse to stay silent.